I'd like to start that our session, the dam management and sustainable dam management and good governance. Well, first of all, I'd like to express my thanks to all the participants, speakers, and the panelists for the international session of sustainable dam management and good governance on the occasion of 2022 22nd Chuncheon Global Water Forum. It's very, the main theme of Chuncheon Global Water Forum is dam and the community. Is very closely linked with the main theme, with my the session theme. So also the three presentations focus about the cooperative dam operation between countries and between community and between stakeholders. Well, before we start, I think it's much better for us to introduce each other. Let me introduce myself. I'm the moderator of this session. My name is ilpyo. I'm the project manager of Laos Koika Water Project. So why don't let me introduce Dr. Hwan. Dr. Go, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hello everyone, I'm Hwan from Yooshin Engineering Corporation, Korea.
And then next, I'd like to invite Irene jihyeno.
Hello, nice to see you all. We already know each other. Yeah, I'm Irene, and I'm the lead of water governance in Koika Laos Namnam project. Nice to see you.
Thank you, Irene. I will invite the speaker, Mr. Gary Smith. Please introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Gary Smith. I'm based in Victoria in Australia, and my background's in rural water management, water systems operations, and water accounting and water sharing.
So, thank you, Mr. Gary. So, please excuse, we couldn't include your name on the agenda of this session. So it was the information was very, very urgent. So please excuse that. So can I invite Lucie to introduce yourself?
And hello everyone. So my name is Lucie Bright. I work at Alluvium Consulting, and I've been working with Gary Smith and a team of people. We're working with the Australian Water Partnership on a project in Laos to do with some guidelines on the coordination of flows.
Thank you very much. And Emily, why don't you introduce yourself?
So I'm Emily Barber, and I'm the program lead of the Mekong program for the Australian Water Partnership based in Canberra. And I have one of my colleagues on the call as well, Ingrid Kalia.
So Ingrid, so please introduce yourself.
Hi everyone, I'm Ingrid, and I'm working with Emily, the Australian Water Partnership, and we are supporting the Alluvium team with their work in Laos.
Thank you very much. So, Mr. Lampon from MEM, would you please introduce yourself?
Hi everyone, my name is Dimanivong. I'm working for Ministry of Energy and Mine, and in charge for hydropower reservoir management operation. Yep.
Thank you. And also, Lampon, please excuse, I couldn't, change it at the title of your presentation on the agenda.
Okay. It's okay.
Yeah, actually that the agenda was already finalized, more than a week ago. Okay, then I'd like to invite speakers for the session. First of all, I'd like to invite Australia team, the coordination of flows for the sustainable water management and Australia case. So, Mr. Gary and Luis, who will be the first?
Gary will be presenting first, and Gary, let me know if you'd like me to share my screen. I can lead the PowerPoint if you like.
Thank you. Thank you. You can share the screen.
Okay, so there's a range of challenges in Laos for water management, and Australia has experienced pretty much all of those challenges that Laos is experiencing at different times. I guess some of the highest priority drivers for governance reforms in Australia have been water shortage, regular droughts, but also over allocation of water systems in terms of past sustainable limits. Other big drivers of changes in water governance have been pushing for sustainable water management, particularly around water quality, and the big issues in Australia have been salinity, water salinity and nutrients. Also, environmental water needs has emerged in the last decade and a half as an important issue. So really understanding and establishing ecologically tolerable flow limits for river systems being used for water delivery, but also rebalancing water use between consumptive use and environmental use to get a much more sustainable balance in our river systems. And developing environmental water management techniques and processes, which is quite different from managing for hydropower or managing for deliveries for consumptive use. So responding to all these sorts of challenges has been quite an iterative process. And I suppose one of the main takeaways from the Australian experience is it's complex and it does take time. So in the journey Australia has been on a continuous journey of reform and improvement, which has been ongoing since the mid-1980s. So we've been really working at this for 3 decades now, and learning by doing, adapting. So really trying to apply adaptive management. Thanks, Lucy. So just a quick context for water management in Australia. Australia has highly variable climate and water resource availability. Its water resources are some of the most variable in any of the inhabited continents. We suffer from recurring droughts, severe droughts, but also in contrast, we also experience significant flood events. So a range of extremes, which are getting worse under climate change as well. Australian government in Australia is composed of a national government, and then there are 6 states and 2 territories, all with their own individual governments. And under the Australian Constitution, states and territories are responsible for water and land management activities. So the national government really only gets involved in these matters when there's an important issue arising, and their main tools are providing funding to drive reform and change, and also oversight of activities. But they do get involved when they have an important role to facilitate transboundary reforms or interstate activities to ensure that what the outcomes are in the national interest. So as a result, major water reform in Australia requires national and state government agreement and cooperation. So what I'm going to do is just over a couple of slides really talk through some of the key water governance elements that have been put in place over this reform journey. And I guess one of the key features that we've found is that you really need to start with an aligned vision and aligned action plan. So in Australia, that's largely been provided in most recent times by the 2004 National Water Initiative, which was an overarching umbrella policy framework that really addressed sustainable water planning and management. It included a number of areas about commitments to water planning, returning water systems to sustainable levels of extraction, providing water for the environment, enabling water trading, and reforming water pricing and a range of regulatory oversight arrangements. So it's quite a comprehensive umbrella. And that policy framework was agreed to by the national government and all of the state and territory governments. And all of the states have committed to implement those reforms in their own legislative frameworks. And there's regular independent assessment undertaken on behalf of the national government to report on implementation progress, so that all of the states and territories can compare how they're going and they understand how other territories and states are progressing as well. So once within that aligned vision, there's been a lot of work on institutional arrangements. And one of the key governance reforms was to separate out water resource policy development, policy setting and regulatory oversight. They're done by central government agencies in each state, but system operations and service delivery is done by separate organisations, either privatised or government-owned corporations. So that's been an important element in terms of separating the policy setting from the implementation of and delivery of service. For that service delivery, wherever possible, that's largely been devolved to regionally based organisations which are closer to customers, more closer to the communities they're serving, rather than being a central agency in a state capital. There is a mix of customer-owned and government-owned organisations, particularly in the irrigation delivery sector, where a number of irrigation schemes have been handed over to grower control, to water user control. But all of those organisations, whether they're retained as water agencies in government ownership or have been turned over to customer ownership, they're all managed by skills-based boards and they're all managed along commercial lines. The major storages that provide water for irrigation are largely retained by government-owned water corporations, though. There are a couple of storages that are owned by hydropower generation organisations that are privately owned, but they're very much the minority. Thanks, Lucy. So some of the other governance elements that have been implemented are around water charging and pricing. And all states and territories have implemented independent economic regulation or setting of water charges. So that's all done at arm's length from the government of the day. And all water pricing for urban and for rural water supply has moved to full cost recovery pricing for those services. So it covers the costs of service delivery and operation, maintenance and renewal of those assets. And in the case of urban systems, they also cover a return on and of capital, so return on equity invested in those businesses. Wherever there are cross subsidies, there's also an expectation that those are made transparent so that everybody understands, users, customers and regulators all understand who's paying and where the flow of dollars are, and if there are cross subsidies, what's the rationale for those. The other element that's been really important in water governance is that in the vast majority of situations, there is a requirement and an obligation for the water service providers, the water agencies, to actually seek customer and community input into service delivery. So water corporations that are operating dams, operating irrigation supply networks, are required to set up processes for customer consultation on services and price issues and trade-offs around price and service levels that might be expected. So you can see there's a small diagram, that gives a bit of a conceptual diagram there of the government sets the regulatory framework and provides licensing and authorisation for water authorities and water corporations to operate. They may fund special initiatives if they want natural resource management, or in recent times it's been water saving projects to recover, to improve water efficiency and recover water for the environment. Then water authorities agree with customers and then develop service agreements and service standards, and then they charge customers for those services. But customers exert significant influence on the water authority, but also they'll apply their expectations to government as well in the overall setting of government requirements and obligations for water managers. Because of course, water is an important input to profit-seeking businesses, hydro generators, irrigation farms, industrial businesses, but it's also a community resource and it's highly valued in the environment and for its amenity value. Thanks, Lucy. So, after looking at that pricing and institutional ranges, one of the other really important elements has been water sharing and entitlements to water. And as I mentioned earlier, the National Water Initiative committed all state and territory governments to develop clear entitlement frameworks for all forms of water. So there is clear entitlements for consumptive users, but also for the environment. Environmental water managers now have explicit entitlements for water that they can call for release from dams. to do environmental management and environmental waterings. And it's important those entitlements are backed by a statutory water sharing plan. So there are legislated water sharing rules set out in informal water sharing plans, which nominate how many entitlements are on issue, what's the volume, the reliability or priority of each type of entitlement, what's the tenure, so how long do the water users hold that entitlement for? Mostly they're in perpetuity. And state governments are also required to manage and maintain public registers to record ownership of those entitlements, who owns what entitlements and who has the rights to use the water. The other important element that's included in those water sharing plans is specification of sustainable limits for water extractions. So given our experience with over extraction, there's a very strong push to identify the sustainable limits and ensure that water use and extraction of water is within those sustainable limits. But given that you've limited how much you can take from the environment and given clear entitlements to everybody, you need to allow water to be able to move to new developments. So water trading is a very important feature of water governance and water management in Australia. And you can see that this little diagram on the right of the screen there, that if we're building on finite water resources, so if we have limited water resources, we set up a foundation of clear water property rights and flexible and simple trading, that farmer to farmer trading that is easy for people to participate in. That leads to water movement from lower value to higher value, and that in turn generates economic outcomes, so economic development, but it's also generated substantial opportunities for environmental improvement by being able to purchase entitlements and return them to environmental water managers. The other important, sorry, back just one slide, please. The other important element is also codifying system operations, so that there's clarity around how dam operators and water system managers will operate. So some of those key policies around how water is shared, the system water reserve policies, what are needed for to reserve so that you can provide the reliability of entitlements for consumptive use for hydropower, what are critical human water needs, and we saw that through what we call in Australia the Millennium Drought, which was the worst drought on record since records have been kept. It was significantly in order of magnitude worse and more severe than any previous drought. So there's been inclusions in those system operation arrangements to make sure that there's provision for reserves to cover critical human water needs in droughts, so that major cities don't run out of water. There are also rules around flood mitigation policies and the hierarchy between capturing water for consumptive use versus releasing water from storages to create airspace for flood mitigation. So all of those policies are codified and published so that the community is aware of them. And there are other rules set up for key water system operational outcomes, such as minimum flows between storages, minimum flows at key compliance points down the system, obligations around measurement, monitoring and accounting for water throughout the system. And supporting all of that is a strong requirement for transparency in reporting, which involves independent audit by resource managers, independent reviews of system operator performance to ensure that they have complied with the system operating rules, and public reporting, publication of those independent reviews, so that the water user community and the general community can have confidence that the regulatory arrangements are being put in place, and that they can have confidence in the water accounting and protection of rights for water and sharing of water between all parties. So a very quick run through of perhaps a simple example of this, and this is perhaps a small contained example in the island of state of Tasmania, which is an island. So in this case, hydropower is very significant water development in Tasmania, and it was built between the 1930s and the 1980s, so a very rapid period of development. You can see there this is the island Tasmania. So Hydro Tasmania is the largest dam manager in Australia. as you can see there in the red circle, they've got 52 lakes, 54 large dams, and a myriad of other smaller dams and weirs, and 30 hydropower stations spread across Tasmania. So not only do they have multiple stakeholders around their storages and dams, but also on those river systems downstream of their hydropower sites. They were subject to very significant environmental protests in the 1980s that resulted in the cancellation of some significant hydropower developments, particularly the Franklin Dam, which was a major case where the national government intervened. And they've also been subject to a very strong farmer lobby group that's looking for water releases from hydropower storages to support new irrigation developments downstream of them. Thanks, Lucy. So yeah, there's quite a bit of animosity and a very adversarial arrangement had grown up. So the Tasmanian hydropower operator really looked at how could they turn that around. So they really invested heavily in stakeholder engagement and also invested in developing the science and doing economic studies and research on water management options. How could water for irrigators be provided and water for the environment without unacceptably compromising hydropower generation as well? They're fortunate that they operate a very large system with some operational flexibility, so it did allow stakeholder environmental requirements at some moderate cost. So they're able to look for where are opportunities and trying to create win-win solutions. What they did was by seeking to accommodate some of these different demands for water and providing multiple benefits rather than focusing solely on hydropower benefits, it improved their social license to operate. They were started to be considered as a responsible corporate citizen, and they're now a leader in the International Hydropower Association and developing hydropower sustainability guidelines. So it's been quite a turnaround for an organisation that was seen as very detrimental to the environment to be leading the push for sustainable management of hydropower. They've also, as well as being a hydropower operator, have diversified into wind farms and are looking at pump storage to really become a diversified energy producer and meeting some targets for carbon reduction. Thanks, Lucy. So you can see here is a bit of a schematic of a whole of a system where you can see multiple storages, interconnected storages with other uses and urban developments downstream. The system's designed to meet power demands all year round across Tasmania as an isolated system, although they have now been interconnected by an undersea cable to a mainland. But they have hydropower developments in a range of different basins that gives them some geographic spread, so that they do have some some buffer and capability and redundancy, so that they can manage the risks of variable rainfall across the state and are not reliant on a particular basin or a particular region for all of their production. So it gives a bit of risk management by diversifying their range of generating locations. Thanks, Lucy. So in terms of flow coordination in the Tasmanian system, you can see here, this graph provides a simple example of some of the bounds that they operate to. You can see that at the upper level, they have a prudent storage level, that green line there, so that when their storages are above that line, they're comfortable and they can look at the total amount of energy in storage. But once they hit that prudent storage level, that's seen as a trigger, an early warning indicator that they might be approaching some risk of not meeting future demands. So they can start to monitor and manage the system more closely, look at demands, and also look at other opportunities in case they're entering drier than usual conditions. So they might look at alternate supplies like gas generation, or importing more energy through the undersea cable links from the mainland to reduce demand and conserve water to make sure that they can meet basic demands in future. Then you'll see at the lower end there, the bottom blue line is their high reliability level. that sits on top of the Energy Security Reserve. So even if there's very dry weather and they're pulled down to that bottom level there of the green zone, they still have sufficient reserves there for extremely dry weather and to cope with unexpected outages of the mainland interconnector cable. So they can still maintain energy security, albeit there won't be as much buffering and as much reserve capacity. And you can see how that varies across the year based on their on statistical analysis of inflows. It's not a constant static level. That reserve, high reliability reserve level varies throughout the year in response to seasonality and patterns of rainfall and inflow to storages. Thanks, Lucy. So that's all I wanted to give you as a very short overview of 3 decades of water governance development in Australia, but it sets a bit of the scene for the work we're undertaking in conjunction with the Lao government, and I'll hand over to Lucy to speak to that.
Thanks, Gary, and I'm mindful of time, so I'll probably make this fairly brief so we can all get our words in. So as Gary said, we're an Australian team that have been brought on by the Australian Water Partnership through Australian Aid, and we're working directly with the Lao National Mekong Committee Secretariat in Laos. So myself and my colleague Simon Crone recently returned from our first trip there, and it provided a really great basis for starting this project around developing guidelines. So as Gary said, we're actually, we do experience, although we're different countries, different sides of the world, so to speak, we actually do experience and understand the challenges faced in Laos today and what they're probably going to be expecting to see in the future. So we're talking about flooding, drought. In terms of the number of hydropower plants there in Laos, we understand there's sort of some inefficiencies in terms of production. There can be poor water quality, water shortages, whether that be for domestic use, for irrigation and agriculture, or industrial. And in the same way Australia is facing challenges due to climate change, Laos is going to be experiencing sort of similar issues, probably different kinds of problems, but it's going to be impacting the way they deal with their water. So Australia has sort of already undergone a lot of this development, but Laos is right sort of in the middle of this accelerated development. There's already been a large number of large dams being built, and that's continuing here. We can see by 2030, we're expecting there to be about 84 large dams. Many of these are in Cascade. So it kind of sets the scene for this need to better manage flows. The reason for us to sort of do this project is a recognition that there's already some challenges in ensuring sufficient water is shared amongst all the water users, and there's a balance and a good coordination. We can identify already there's the challenges specific to Lao PDR is the difference in hydropower ownership, where Gary mentioned there's actually a large sort of centrally owned number of these assets is by the state with very few private dams or assets in other settings. There's a real split within Lao PDR, and that adds some complexity to management. There's different energy markets. So we're a national single market in Australia. We don't have international sort of transfer of power, but that is actually what happens in Lao PDR. And there's not a single national grid. We acknowledge that there's the information sharing tools are not as progressed or as advanced in Lao PDR, and there's limitations potentially due to forecasting and communication and sharing of information. So the guidelines that we're going to be developing with our partners in with the Lao National Mekong Committee is intended to sort of cover all the possible water uses that are sort of the dominant uses there, which includes water supply, irrigation, hydropower production, consideration of the environment, so that might be fish passage, water quality, economic activities, tourism, navigation. So on balance, what we're trying to achieve is operation of the water infrastructure, primarily the dams, the hydropower dams, to balance the water demands, to achieve improved social and economic development and ecosystem health. So we're trying to find a balance that actually has good outcomes for everyone. We're drawing on the Mekong River Commission procedures for maintenance of flows on the mainstream. So we'll be adopting a similar sort of principle with regards to understanding what are these thresholds, in the same way that the hydropower production has sort of these limits that they see. When it hits this limit, we're safe. If it starts to drop, it might be caution. So the Mekong River Commission has developed this for the mainstream, and we'll be using similar principles for our work within Laos. So the three main components of our guidelines will be to provide a methodology to determine those priority locations. So in each individual basin, we need to understand where is the greatest need and what is the risk associated with that location. It might be that flooding is a high risk in an area that's densely populated, or it might be that drought is a risk in an area, you know, with high value economic crops. The next component will be to provide methodology to determine thresholds. So this is quite a practical tool based on the local needs there and ability to use their data to determine what those flows should be. And then the third part, which is just as important, is to develop the decision-making tools, procedures, and framework, so that if a water level drops or raises too high, we have decision-making sort of people involved that can take action when those thresholds are hit. So that's just a quick summary of what we'll be producing as a part of our project.
The case study, the models in Australia, and your intention to how to develop that kind of guidance of the coordination flow for Lao PDR. So it's really interesting and fruitful for me. So particularly, you know, it's good opportunity for me to learn that, you know, cases of Australia, how do you manage the water. So I think, you know, we can have, you know, some discussion time after the whole presentation. Next, I'd like to invite Mr. Lampon Dimanivong. So the director of the Department of Energy Policy and Planning, Ministry of Energy and Mining, Lao PDR. He's going to make a presentation about the challenge of applying integrated water resource management in Lao PDR, just focusing at the hydropower reservoir management. Actually, Lucie explained about the coordination flow for Lao PDR, and Lampon is actually the owner of the Lao PDR, Laos dam management. So I'd like to invite Mr. Lampon for the Lao PDR dam management issue.
I just want to share about the experience and the challenge of apply IWRM water resource management in Laos, focus on hydropower reservoir management. Okay, actually the content in here, I want to speak in about 5 content about background and existing reservoir management mechanism and MBM existing reservoir operation report system so far, and KICT project and the challenge in hydropower reservoir management. I think most of you already know well about the information about about Laos, right? Actually, Laos is I thought Laos is located in South Asia, with total land is about 236,800 square kilometers, and 90% of the country is located in Mekong River Basin. Water resource per capita is about 55,000 cubic meters per year, and 35% of annual flow is flow into the Mekong River from tributary of the Laos. And the monthly river flow by pattern of rainfall is about 80% in flood season and during the rain season, and 20% in drought in dry season. So Laos had abundance of water resource, which there are total is about 62 river basin. In terms of hydropower, actually, the location map here will show you about the location of the capacity of the hydropower. Actually, according to the
previous presentation is more than 75. I think I've seen the Lucie mentioned hydropower project existing in Laos, but actually the data that I collect, that means this is the data that is report us every day, is about 66 hydropower existing. Its capacity is more than 9,598 megawatt, and the map is show the capacity of the hydropower, mostly in the center and to the north that we have a large capacity is more than 100 megawatt. In terms of the capacity of reservoir, actually, I mean, we have about 8 hydropower reservoir that larger than 1,000 million cubic meter, and 5 reservoir is export. This is a hydropower reservoir, and 6 reservoir is about 500 to 1,000 million cubic meter to reservoir export, and 9 reservoirs about 100 to 500 cubic meter per second. This reservoir, I consider only the reservoir that can be regulated, because we consider about 23 reservoir that can regulate. However, the previous presentation I mentioned there's more than 66 hydropower, but some of them is a runoff river type, so that means we cannot regulate the reservoir. We cannot regulate the water. Yeah. And according to the mechanism on reservoir management, actually so far, in terms of the management of the reservoir or hydropower reservoir, we have EDL. EDL is for domestic. We have EDL or dispatching center or NCC. They do monitor and operate based on the declare from the hydropower project, and they will ask them to operate. And for irrigation, we have kind of like district and irrigation department. They will manage the irrigation reservoir. So in case of export, IPP, we call IPP, it will be the buyer will dispatch based on the hydropower project owner declare the capacity of the generation. For example, like ECAT, EVN, EDC, so that means we have different kind of the dispatch. So actually, so far we do report every day, and we monitoring all the hydropower reservoir, all the country, and they will report us to. So far, we have only WhatsApp system. So every day we will collect the data, and we will check the data, the capacity of reservoir, full release of each reservoir, and we will report to the government every day, especially during this time, because this time is flood season. So we have to monitor which reservoir will open the gate. We have to report to the government and report to the local community about to warn them based on the gate opening, because they have to careful how to manage the flood. And so far, actually, Dr. Hong already mentioned we have worked with KICT project. Yeah, actually we have, and maybe Dr. Hong can explain the detail, and we expect that this project will be a pioneer project for the Lao government in terms of the water center or monitoring. I expect that we can have because this project they have 2 kinds. One is water information system, and another thing is disaster management. And the project will have kind of like data correction in the real time, and optimizations and everything, like install the system, disaster management system, dam operation information system, and we will collect all the data and in the real time. Now we don't have a real time data from all them, but in the future, if we have this project, if this project finished, we will have it, and we can manage and cooperate easily. I think, especially this project will be for Nam Ngum only. Yeah, this data will come, and we will have a tool for dam operation, optimize rule in terms of power generation and water use, fast breaks. I think it's quite good concept for Lao government in the future. Yeah, and fast forecasting and warning system. I think this is good. We have experience so far. Sometimes when the dam want to open the gate, we just ask the dam open the gate, and we inform the local people, but we don't know how much of the flood will impact to the local. We just say, okay, dam will open the gate about this amount, for example, 1,000 cubic meters per second, but local people, they still don't know and not clear how large of that. They just say, oh, you just open the gate. That's why there are many impacts. Sometimes they cannot manage that. Yeah, this is the managing tool. Yeah, this is the concept of the flood map. For this project, they will do a flood map and warning area that people can evacuate from this area, from the flood area. And in the future, if we know exactly where to go, so that when people can manage easily. Okay, another thing, the challenge in hydro power reservoir management, especially in terms of IWRM. Actually, I think Lucie already mentioned some already. So, but in terms of the, hydropower reservoir management, you may know that because there are different organizations of water usage planning. It's not easy, and each sector, they have their own mandate, right? They can do what they are doing, and there is no rule government operate of hydropower reservoir for other purpose, because during planning, because maybe because of lacking of data, so we cannot plan for another purpose as well. And another thing, there is no clear mechanism for cross-sector cooperation. So far, we do cooperate, but sometimes it's not easy to communicate with them. Sometimes we still have not clear and what to do, especially another ministry. And it's not clear allocation of water demands downstream of the project. For example, Nam Ngum, we still have it's still not clear what exactly and where and how much of the water should be, because actually the hydropower, we have large reservoir, we can manage that, but there is no information sent to the dam, we need the flow, this amount, something like that. So that's why it's difficult for us. And another final one is during the concession agreement, the reservoir, especially hydropower reservoir, we have proposed only for electricity generation. Yeah. So that's why if we have clear mechanism or clear location, clear the demand of water, I think we can manage some, because it's maybe less compared to the generation.
Thanks for your excellent presentation by Mr. Gary, Ms. Lucie from the Australian side, and Mr. Lampun from
Excuse me. Can you hear Dr. Go's voice? Can you hear? Okay, okay, thank you.
Okay.
Yes, please go ahead, sir.
So in your last slide, prepared by Mr. Lampon, I think it's quite interesting and quite challenging to me. So you list up the challenges, why you cannot implement IWRM in Laos PDR, and with many pending and serious questions. So that means in reverse, maybe Lao PDR government officers and water experts in your country, you may have a chance to how to build your IWRM approach at the river basin level by overcoming those challenges one by one or step by step as much as you can do. So because you say water demand for existing or future target years, you don't have that kind of projection study in your country. So actually you don't know how much water do you need at each river basin of your country. And there are so many different organizations in water sector, and there are so many different water users, but you do not know what will be the most coordinated and most efficient water allocation among those different water users. And as far as I know, hydropower industry is very important in Lao PDR. That means the hydropower reservoir system operation is very important in Lao PDR also. But maybe this time, if you think about IWRM, it may be the right time. What will be the contribution? What will be the another input from those hydropower reservoir system in Lao PDR to provide the necessary minimum environmental flow, or to provide necessary irrigation water or other M&I water? What do you need and now and the future of your country? So, but you say still you don't have rules that governs hydropower reservoir operation. That's quite shocking to me, because every hydropower reservoir operator, investor, they want to make money by generating as much hydropower energy from your hydropower infrastructure. But if you don't have that kind of rule that makes money, why do you build that kind of infrastructures? So maybe you may need more scientific and technological advancement using your developed system. And so, and also you're worrying about mechanism for cross-sector cooperation. That could be another very important thing for inclusive water management planning and cooperation. So I hope I'd like to suggest Lao PDR government to provide some good example of integrated river basin planning to overcome these challenges. And the other things I'd like to advise you, by working with Australian water people and by working with KICT expert for the similar effort, maybe you can get a lesson and you can get more input to make more compromising and integrated river basin planning to overcome those IWRM planning. Thanks. That's my comment.
So Dr. Go, you have only comments? Any question?
But just very general question. I don't know, in your Lao PDR, what kind of water allocation conflict is serious? Maybe water allocation between hydropower water and irrigation water, or water allocation conflict between hydropower water and the other M&I water and other things. So that's my first question. And my second question is that
why don't you, you have, the second question after we listen from,
okay,
Mr. Lampon for the first question.
Actually, I just want to elaborate more on, that there is no rule. No rule for another purpose of generation. they have their own rule for electricity generation, but they don't have another rule for, I mean, like water demand or water sector. In terms of the water conflict, I think so far we don't have the, I mean, like the water conflict between the sector, because actually demand of water for another sector is maybe less compared to what we are released from the generation so far. That's why it is not clear, I mean, like conflict, but there is some happen, but it may be some impact, but it's not significant in terms of the how to, I mean, like to manage that one. So that's why so far we still don't have like the clear conflict. I'm not sure whether in Australia or in your country they have it, but so far we don't have in Laos, we don't have the clear. Yeah.
Okay, your second question.
And second question is, as far as I know, you have many hydropower dams and reservoirs in Laos. How about the irrigation dams or water supply dams for municipal water use? Are there many too?
Actually, irrigation dam we do have many, but not much. For example, in Nam Ngum Basin, mostly in downstream of Nam Ngum Dam, Nam Ngum 1 is not many. I think it's 2 or 3. But most of the irrigation system, they usually use a pump system, you know, because we are released from hydropower reservoir, and we have the system of the pump to pump to the east irrigation system. Yep.
And Dr. Go, so you have any question to Gary or Lucy, the Australian colleague?
Oh, not much. Maybe
Okay.
later. Let me.
Yeah. Okay. Then I'm gonna turn I'm gonna invite Irene to make some comment or question. Irene, please.
Thank you, Chair, and very interesting presentation from Mr. Gary and Ms. Lucy, and also Mr. Lampong. So I have 2 questions to Gary and maybe Lucy. Yeah, regarding water governance, it was really concrete and different points of view from our KOICA project. And Gary's presentation was much more depth regarding economic regulation, so kinds of mechanism for water pricing, including different stakeholders. And I just would like to ask that kinds of pricing system of water use, would it be possible for the kind of the low-income countries to build that kind of mechanism at the beginning stage through this kind of development cooperation program? That's my first question. And can I go to next one, or? Okay, then I go for a second question. Yeah, regarding Tasmanian energy case study, it was really interesting case for me. And how much coverage was dependent by hydropower generation for Tasmania? I mean, from whole energy coverage, how much? Because we have a kind of case study example of the carbon-free island. It's Kapado Island near Jeju main island. And this island, just 200 residents are living there. And they are using, actually not hydropower, they are wind energy, the ocean wind energy, and also solar power. And they would like to make a kind of model for stimulating that kind of carbon-free island to other area, like not only small island, maybe kinds of a rural area or any kinds of the potential target area. So I have that kind of question.
Okay, first one you're talking about pricing. I think the question was about could that be applied in water charging? Look, traditionally in Australia, we've come from a background where governments subsidised water developments for social and economic development purposes and didn't recover the full cost of maintaining and operating those systems. But by the 1980s, 1990s, governments had large debts around their water development schemes, and they didn't think it was reasonable. All governments didn't want to continue to subsidise that. So there was really a tradition to full cost recovery, which is quite difficult for the water users who'd been accustomed to cheap water, and difficult for governments, obviously, in that case. But there was a range of methods involved, and what we saw out of that was that by giving people a pathway forward with gradual measured change, they were able to adapt. And many people had to change their crop types, get into higher value to justify the real cost of water. But it did actually improve economic outcomes right across the system, and governments provided support in terms of redevelopment of farms, assistance to improve the efficiency of water use on farms, as well as in the systems itself. But in terms of what we've found is that was quite a later development. Some of the earlier reforms in governance were around water entitlements, volumetric measurement, and improving the system oversight and efficiency. So you can do that in a staged way when things are appropriate, I guess, you don't have to do all of that from day one. And it's really picking what's most important driver that you need to address. I think the second question was about Tasmania and their reliance on hydropower. Traditionally, Tasmania has been pretty much 100% reliant on hydropower. The population of Tasmania is around 500,000 people. And they had, I think, one coal-fired power station around in the last sort of decade and a half. They've built an undersea cable to link the Tasmanian network to the mainland, and they've been exporting power. But in the drought, in the severe drought, the Millennium Drought, they were able to actually import power. So it's given them both an additional source of revenue for their hydropower investment, but also a source of risk management for drought and when they need to import power from the mainland. And as I said, they're diversifying into other forms. So Tasmania has very windy locations, got some great sites for wind power as well. So they're starting to look at how do they diversify out of hydropower while still maintaining that as the base of their operation, but looking to really expand that. And I think there's processes in place to duplicate that interconnecting cable to the Eastern Australian grid.
Thank you. And I have another question regarding Mr. Lampon pointed out the cross-cutting sectors, coordination, difficulty of that kind of cross-cutting perspective between different ministries. As far as I know, the mainly contributed by Department of Foreign Affairs of Australia and Australian Water Partnership and the kinds of Australian side made a kind of water management subsector group at the national level for a decade activity from 2016 to 2025. And as far as I know, Department of Water Resources of Malay of Laos, they are coordinating the kinds of ministries, the issues and challenges for coordination, and MEM, of course, or Ministry of Irrigation or Ministry of Fishery, and all kinds of water-related ministries are already kind of members of that subsector group. And as far as I know, there is a kind of one annual meeting per year, and you have kinds of a communication platform. Anyway, even though it's difficult to get into real practice, but as far as I know, there is the dialogue platform you have. But I mean, that kind of mechanism is in operation well. Do you feel, Mr. Lampon, because you are the member of the kinds of the Ministry of subsector group? And if not, what may be challenging points for operation?
I'm not sure what I can get your question. Can you ask again?
Yeah,
Well,
actually, you know, there is a water management subsector group of Laos PDR you have, and Ministry of Energy and Mines is the core member of that water management subsector group. And you don't know, you don't have information regarding that.
Actually, I'm sorry, I don't know because the subsector group of I still not clear because maybe I'm new. I think I don't know about this stuff. What kind of sector group? Maybe Department of Water Resource they are doing. We don't know. You know, I don't know about the subsector group.
Okay, then maybe, yeah. Then maybe I just would like to be advised by Australian colleagues or maybe Mr. Lampon or any colleague from MRC. Actually, KICT project regarding water governance restructuring is much more focusing on institutional arrangements. And in 2015, by the support of ADB, anyway, Namnung River Commission was formed. And it was a kind of the mechanism was under the Prime Minister. And of course, Moline, MEM, and any kinds of the related ministry, maybe 9 or 10 ministries was there. And then there was just some kind of kickoff meeting and was just scared, could not go on anymore. So through this KICT project, we don't want to duplicate that kind of mistake. And we would like to make a kind of real concrete action from central level to river basin level. And actually this kind of governance restructuring was formed in the midst of kind of asking by Moline. So Moonlight's perspective actually this moment much more clearly reflected kinds of building coordination mechanism between Moonlight and 6 provincial levels, the riparian provincial level of Namdong River Basin, but we could not actually catch the MEM's perspective in the right direction because as you told, the kind of issue could be rather different and direction of governance could be different. So I just would like to be kind of, even though slightly, or I mean, not in conflict is okay, but I mean, kind of advice based on your experience and kind of potential directive regarding this kind of activity by KICT, because we would like to make kind of regular dialogue platform between central level and provincial level, and would like to make the follow-up project based on agenda as an outcome of that kinds of coordinating mechanism. So what is your thought regarding that kinds of the dialogue between different stakeholders, Mr. Lampon from maybe water and energy hydropower perspective, and maybe Australian colleague, you can share your experience, that could be really excellent.
Yes, Lampon first.
Yeah, I just want to share my experience in according to the planning. Actually, I mean, I ever do a feasibility study for hydropower project in Laos. Actually, the key thing is sometimes, you know, like you mentioned that one way have many projects, right? For example, but the thing is, we just want to know where is location of water demand for downstream. For example, any plan, you know, how much of irrigation they need of the water. We just want to know that, like water utilization, how much the flow they want, you know. Finally, when we enter to Department of Water Resource, I mean, like discuss with the, I mean, I don't know, whatever, ROB or river basin organization, but finally we don't have that kind of data. That's why that's why it's quite create difficulty for dam operation, because that's why I mean the government we just generates for electricity. We don't consider the another issue because we don't have that clear data. You know, like if we have that kind of clear data, clear demand in which location, we can fix and we can do manage. You know, that's why I heard you mention there are many projects happen in one way, but finally in the report we have still not clear what we want in terms of hydropower. We just want to know where you want the water, which location, what for, how long, for example, right? How much, okay, during dry season, how much water you want in this time, you need it for what, for example, right? How long, you know? And we can manage that, you know, because we know that demand of electricity about this amount, and we let's say we can say, okay, we have to operate this project in this level if we know exactly what the flow demand in which location. Yeah, that's it. I think just only small thing, but we cannot get. I think you already work with us really long time. Did you get this data from, I mean, DWR or Monterey? Because sometimes when we enter, we just talk what we want is over, but it's minor thing we want, we cannot get it. Yeah.
Okay, well, actually, under the umbrella of Chuncheon Global Water Forum, I think we, the three party, the Australia, a KICT team, and also the Laos PDR, we have very effective project meeting. So I think that the demand of water location and the amount and the time, demand time is one of the critical condition to discuss the coordination of flow. So if there is no any that kind of information about the water demand, the location and the amount and the time of the water demand, so it's not easy for Lucie how to make a guidance for the the coordination flow. So Irene, you have another question. You had already another question to Lucie.
Well, I think it's probably worth touching on that, because we do see that as really, we'll develop the guidelines, but ultimately, it really needs to be applied individually in each basin. It's not going to be, all right, the maximum level is this everywhere at all times of the year. So although, the main deliverable for this project from our side will be to develop the guidelines, which will be national, but within the guidelines, it's really to make sure that these core principles and methodologies for using these principles are included. And we really see the first stage in using the guidelines will be to do that assessment, to sort of essentially map out in each basin, where are the water users, what are the water demands, at what time of year, and what is needed. From our experience, honestly, in these last 2 weeks, while myself and Simon Crone were in country, we can see already that there's already existing informal, it would appear more informal arrangements, and it's relatively ad hoc. So in certain locations, one of the examples was, I might misremember the exact location, but potentially it's downstream of Nam Nung Wan. There's, an area of sort of tourism with some floating restaurants on the banks of the river. And there is an understanding and agreement between the dam operator and the downstream sort of business, essentially, that they need a minimum water level of this. So they actually have that agreement in place. They say, yep, we need to make sure there's a minimum amount being released to meet that particular objective. However, that kind of arrangement appears to be fairly ad hoc. It's not formalized, but we can see there are already agreements in place in different parts of the country. However, it's not necessarily consistent and it's not necessarily formalized. So we think this is already happening. It's probably just on an informal basis. and it's not necessarily consistent, and it doesn't cover every user in every location. So there is already some principles being adopted. They already do operate where they need to for particular activities in particular conditions, but it's not consistent and it's not wholly covering across the whole country. But we see the most important part is first identifying where is there a need and what are the risks associated with that need.
Thank you, Lucie. So I have one question to you. So as you mentioned, your target is just in developing the guidelines, not applying that kind of guideline to the practical, some river basin or the some to make a solution that the water conflict to provide the guidance of exact guidance from one dam from the dam to to the downstream water demand. But I'd like to ask you that how to make the balance from your guidance, from your guideline. How do you suggest that how do you suggest make the balance between the stakeholders, such as hydropower production and the water user, and also flood damage reduce over the water supply. As Lampon mentioned, the dam operation rule in Laos PDR is just focusing the hydropower generation. So there's a kind of some under the concession agreement between Laos PDR and some the dam developer. So that's my the big concerning.
Yeah, so
the kind of situation.
Yeah, look, there'll be a range of scenarios into how the guidelines will get used. So the second half of our project is sort of the implementation. So we're hoping in the Dimanivong Basin, with yourselves as we've discussed. So we're hoping that essentially those will be draft guidelines that we'll update with some lessons learned. We do already we have identified that there might be some limitations with regards to things like the PPAs, the power purchasing agreements, or the concession agreements. So, that might be unavoidable in certain circumstances. But we I can't help but see this, and Gary talked about this in the context of Australia, that this is step one, or probably step 2 or 3, things have already happened so far, and that this isn't going to be a process of change, and it may take 1 to 2 decades. Part of that will be building in these principles and obligations into future concession agreements. We see that this will start to marry up and tie to other areas of regulation and governance. In terms of conflict, part of the guidelines, because it might be that we develop guidelines for minimum flows, maximum flows, but there might also just be an inherent conflict between water users. So the job of the guidelines won't be to say this person takes precedence over this person or usage, but to ideally develop mechanisms for decisions to be made with the right group of people and have some sense of some consensus there.
Okay, thank you. Hi, Lampon. So actually, I have one question to you. You mentioned that you couldn't see any conflict from the water users from downstream of the dams, as like the amount of water from the irrigation area, or the exact location of the irrigation land area. So, but I'm thinking. So you from the the Laos government, you already listen that kind of voice from the public. So I think there's no any place or opportunity from the the stakeholders to discussing about their water rights, their demand of water itself. So how do you think about that? There's no do you think there's really no conflict, or you think even though there's some conflict or some complaint from the stakeholder, but you couldn't see any that kind of place to discussing about the dialogue between the stakeholders?
Actually, the conflict, there is some, it happened when we have a consultant meeting with the local people, but the thing is, it's not significant, and there is no any, I don't know, like kind of the any, any people who want to say this word, or I don't know, any organization to collect all this data and send to the government. During we visit the local people and have consultation meeting with them, they also complain about the operation. Sometimes they have aquaculture, for example, fish farm along the river, and sometimes the flow suddenly drop down or increasing too fast. Sometimes, and they also complain. But the thing is still not significant. That's why I think we need to have the guideline, but we still don't have this kind of guideline, and that's why we still have not clear. I mean,
yeah, thank you, Mr. Lampon. So and then I have one question to. Oh yeah, yes, go ahead, Mr. Gary.
I was just going to say it's a great time to actually try and develop those, because it's much harder when you're actually experiencing shortage or severe conflict to develop, agreed solutions to those. So before you get to that point, it's a lot easier to develop those things if you can have the arrangements in place for communities to talk to each other about their values, how they want to share water before you get into that crisis situation. It's an ideal time to try and tackle those from our experience. It's very hard to solve problems when you're in the middle of a drought or you've got severe competition and over allocation of resources. It's much more complex to resolve. So having some clarity around the framework that will accommodate future growth and development might be a really good opportunity for Laos.
Tricky.
Sorry, just trying to unmute myself. No, I just wanted to say thank you for the discussion so far. I think it's really interesting, and Lampon, I think it's really interesting to hear too about the data that you mentioned is already being collected from each of the dam operators. And I was interested from your perspective, given that there is already a good sort of communication channel with the dam operators in terms of the perspective of actual coordination. What are your thoughts in terms of where the biggest challenges are around that information sharing and moving that towards the sort of whole of system coordination approach within Lao PDR?
Actually, I already mentioned in my presentation, because I mean, for domestic project, I mean, like the EDL or the government of Laos can manage the flow, right? Because we order electricity from the dam, right? Most of them is the downstream, right? For example, number 1 and number 1, 2, number 1, right? Is domestic. So I think it is good if we have the kind of the coordination in the good way. If we know, I mean, in advance, I think we can manage that. But so far, actually, maybe you already know that we're still not clear, like I mentioned many times. It's great if we have like exact data, maybe if we have kind of like online system in advance, or maybe 1 day or 2 days, I think, or okay, in this area they need the water, or it goes dry. And for example, if it is dry here, finally, if the reservoir is dry, so we have to inform them that it's not because of the reservoir, it is because of the climate change, for example. Sometimes it happens. Yeah, that's why information is important.
Yeah, so in that instance, the dam operators could actually respond to requests from your department. Is that how it works in terms of if there was that clear guidance about releases of water through different parts of the system, it would be possible to communicate that to the dam operators and to make some changes to those releases?
I think we it doesn't mean that we manage the dam, but we are government. We just inform to the dispatcher, okay? Because this dispatcher, I think dispatcher is manage the dam. It's not dam operator. Dam operator just they declare the capacity of generation, and dispatcher just okay. In this amount, it will generate amount of this electricity to the demand, to supply the demand, and the flow from that amount, just from that capacity. Yeah, it's possible.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks.
So, Mr. Gary, actually, I have one question to the Australian case. So I understand I understand that the land, the territory of the land is very huge in Australia. So many rivers run through several states. In that case, you have any rule or regulations to the as like a transboundary issue between the state? So during the drought seasons, the upstream state need to guarantee some amount of water, or the guarantee some quality of the water. So also you have any some problems the diversion of the water from one basin to another basin. So and sometimes it's not in the same state. So then in that case there can make some conflict.
Yeah, certainly the Murray-Darling Basin is the primary example of that. That involves 4 states and a territory, as well as the national government, in the management of that large connected. It's a huge connected system from in the southern part of the basin, which is strongly interconnected and is a major water management zone and market. The travel time from the most remote dam to South Australia, the most downstream state, is 40 days. So I hear Mr. Lampon talking about not knowing the demands. You have to estimate demand, forecast, send water off 40 days before you know what the weather's going to be like, what the demand will be, what the inflows from the tributaries are going to be. So these are problems that are faced in these large systems, and there's been you need to work around scenario planning and exchange of data around that. But certainly there's what we've seen in Australia is that it sometimes takes a long time, but once you've got a clear agreement on how water is going to be shared, the obligations of upstream states to downstream states, what's the nature and form of those entitlements and the flow rules that you put in place, it really gives certainty for investment and development. And once you've got those in place, people are much more confident to start developing the potential and using water for economic outcomes as well as environmental outcomes. So we've certainly seen that. Look, in the start of at the start of the 20th century, there was no agreement on sharing of the water of the Murray-Darling Basin. I think it took about 25 years of argument and discussion between all the states to get that in place. But once that happened, we actually experienced quite a large period of development of water resources, expansion of irrigation networks, building of hydropower systems. So, our experiences that once you get these agreements in place, it can be really positive. But what you also have to know is what we've learned clearly is that you can't predict the future, especially on the climate change. So you need to build in mechanisms into those agreements for periodic review and revision of the arrangements, because it's not, we're not working in a static system. So we're moving away from fixed volumes to shares of a variable pool of water resources. And also, how do we reset if the sharing changes, because the environment tends to get disproportionately affected by climate change, because most of their water is less secure than some of the high reliability for irrigation or town supply or for hydropower. So, some of those things are being built into agreements now. How do we actually reset the balance, and who bears the cost of that in future? Without saying what the answer will be, it's setting up a process to work through those questions and the triggers to start those review processes when situations change.
Thank you very much. So, Mr. Botkosal from MRC is just joined our meeting. So actually, he's supposed to make a presentation. The 1:20 or 1:30. So anyway, so Mr. Botkosal, you have the floor. You can make the presentation, and you have 20 or 25 minutes. 20 minutes. Then we need some 10 minutes discussion.
This hours, yeah. Okay, this is, you can see my presentation.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yes.
Thank you. It's
Okay,
clear.
I would like to thank you very much for inviting me to do this presentation. It's really important. On behalf of the Mekong River Commission Secretariat, I would like to present on what we understand the sustainable dam management in the lower Mekong Basin and cooperation between upstream and the downstream countries. The contents of my presentation cover on history of the Mekong Corporation and Mekong River Commission, and we cover on hydropower development in the lower Mekong Basin, some procedures of the MRC, especially for hydropower management and development in lower Mekong Basin, and at the end, cooperation for sustainable Mekong River management. For the story, if you can see, I mentioned about the upstream countries and lower downstream countries. So the upstream country, it's been the China and Myanmar that contribute from China about 17% of the flow to the Mekong River Basin, and Myanmar about 1%. And this is the longest river in the world, number 12. You may see that the length of this 4,733 kilometers, and in terms of the basin areas, is 21st largest in the world, and the main annual discharge around 446 cubic kilometers is number 10 largest in the world. And the population in the river basin, about 70 million people who are survived based on the Mekong river natural resources, including water for economic development, environmental protection, even the societies. And the story of the Mekong very long. It starts in 1957, but however, with support from the old UN, what we call the UN East Cafe, that time to support the countries of the member in order to identification of the development, especially for the for navigation, but also hydropower development at that time. Yeah. So the story comes from the 1957 that established the Mekong communities, but now we have the Mekong River Commission. Yeah. At that time, during the war in Cambodia, it stopped the function, but however, they established interim Mekong Committee without Cambodia, only Laos, Thailand, and Vietnam. And only in 1995, we come back to join for the Mekong River Commission establishment by the agreement we call 1995 Mekong Agreement that's signed by 4 countries, Cambodia, Laos, Thai, and Vietnam. So this is very good story of the cooperation among 4 countries. This is the 1995 Mekong Agreement, that especially how the countries signed the agreement in order to sustain development for the Mekong River, not limited to the upstream country, China and Myanmar. However, China and Myanmar did not join this agreement, but we have very good collaboration of the dialogue partner within the 4 member countries. So the 1995 Mekong Agreement notify and consultate the member countries, especially on water use, which may have significant impact from countries to another countries, especially from upstream to downstream. And also the country make effort to avoid or minimize or mitigate harmful effects. So it is really important to think about reasonable and equitable use of our development. And we have to maintain the flow on the mainstream. Yeah, we consider on the mainstream, even we have tributaries and also to cease activities that cause substantial damage when the proof is provided by the affected countries. So if one country develop any, especially hydropower, and if any damage from development, it would be responded by the 1995 Mekong Agreement, and also discuss state responsibilities if damage caused by development. And important as agreement said, Article 9 is about freedom of navigation. So we have the navigation example, Vietnam and Cambodia, Mekong Delta and the Mekong mainstream, and Thailand with Laos, and possible connect to the upstream China also. And among these important notified emergency situation when what happened like emergencies. Yeah. So you can see on this we have 5 procedures that to implement the 1995 Mekong Agreement and agreed by the minister level. Like we share data information, we call PDs, and we think about the water use monitoring on the mainstream. And we develop hydropower, we have to apply the PNPCA, procedure for notification, prior consultation, and agreement. And also procedure to mainstream the flow on the mainstream. And last one, procedure on water qualities. And the 1995 Mekong Agreement set up very clear mandate and function of the Mekong River Commission. And we have the 3 almost important we call core function. You know, the MRC Secretariat, we play the role for provide service, administrative and management function, and important number 2 core function, management, what related to require the data, exchange monitoring, analysis, set up the model, assessment, planning support, forecasting, warning, emergency, and implementation of 5 procedures as I mentioned. And number 3, important MRC will play the role consulting and advisory service to support the country. So based on that, we can assume that MRC play important role, platform for water diplomacy and regional cooperation, not only for member country, but up to China and Myanmar upstream countries. About hydropower development, that this is the question you asked me to present. Really important what the story. So we have good opportunity in Thailand for development of hydropower. Opportunity how we can increase regional energy development and security. For development of economy, we need more energy and opportunity to develop because of the situation in the lower Mekong Basin. And to support also national, regional, socio-economic development in all member countries and contribute to the greenhouse gas reduction because hydropower is eligible energy, regenerable energy. However, we have the challenges for hydropower development as change of flow from upstream to downstream, and sometimes water fluctuation, you know, when we open gate or some kind of the flood example. And for hydropower, it causes our sediment loss, nutrition, and bank erosion impact because of the flow change. And also for fishery and ecological system may change from the hydropower development. And hydropower development is the cascade dam. It means river disconnectivity. We could not avoid this disconnectivity of the river system. And the people who live along the river may get impact on their own livelihoods. Yeah. So you may see the hydropower development in the lower Mekong Basin, especially Laos, Thailand, Vietnam. So you can read on this table. Up to now, we have hydropower, some hydropower development. When we talk about upstream in China, existing 10 dams. And for lower Mekong Basin, we are going to develop at least 12 hydropower dams. Yeah, but so far we have in Laos, in Cambodia, we still not yet, but only on the plan. You can see different color on the map. Yeah, on the map that what already done in Laos, in Thailand, and Vietnam, but in Cambodia still not yet. Yeah, not yet. However, we have many hydropower on the tributaries of the Mekong River Basin. In order to develop the hydropower development from MRC commitment side, we have the hydropower development strategy, important established in 2001, important to create the knowledge why we have to develop the hydropower development. We think about the mitigation measure, how this strategy could provide to the member country must be followed, because we discuss among the member countries. So we have our last 20-year experience for hydropower development in the lower Mekong Basin. So important from the 2001, we have the knowledge, we generate the knowledge, and then for 2021, we enhance our knowledge for information sharing, coordination for our cooperation, especially on cascade dam development. So we can strengthen our cooperation on how to sustain hydropower development. So now we have sustainable hydropower development strategy. What guide us clear, at least we have 5 priority strategy. Yeah, priority. When we think about hydropower development, we should consider how we can improve sustainability of individual hydropower project in the Mekong Basin. We should think about the benefit, optimize potential adverse impact of the hydropower operational that we minimize through adaptive management of existing projects, update design, how to think about specific impact mitigation, and then improve effectiveness. Important to apply the P and PCA process, prior notification, prior consultation and agreement among member countries. And then we have too many hydropower cascade operation, because the role of the cascade operation important. Upstream, downstream, how they can share the data or information, even mainstream and tributaries project. And then we develop the cooperation mechanism, how the mechanism will work to exchange and sharing information among member countries with regard to environmental management, flood and drought mitigation, and community safety. And then we think about upstream development also. China and Myanmar, they have own development, how they should share the data information to improve the whole lower Mekong Basin, even upstream, upper Mekong Basin for hydropower development. And we think about the energy security and economic benefit among member countries, as well as with the China and Myanmar also. So the net benefit from national hydropower can be shared to another member countries. Example, I bring into account the hydropower development in Laos, let share to Cambodia, yeah, Downstream hydropower. And then we think about the social impact to the people livelihood, the people along the Mekong River Basin, but also the people who are affected, especially gender aspect, what the local community living around or along the Mekong River. And then we can think about the information gap, because through this strategy, we still require more gap to fill it, especially from the hydropower development. The target study we develop, especially from the upstream to the downstream. So from this hydropower development strategy, we need for operational coordination among member countries, especially what we understand on dam operation and dam impact with the climate change about the extreme flood or drought. And also we need to increase about sharing transboundary information or data, especially I said that about operational rule with regard to flow management, sediment management, management of emergency, and also design management of hydropower cascade that we still need to modify or need to be improved, improve from time to time with discussion among member countries. You know, MRC procedure for hydropower management and development is really important. So for the Mekong River Commission, based on 1995 Mekong Agreement, we identify the two important aspects for mainstream development and for tributaries development of hydropower. For the mainstream, we consider on season, dry and wet. So what we think about specific agreement when the notifying country, they have to use the water for inter-basin from Mekong Basin to another outside of the Mekong Basin. So we have to consider on specific agreement. And if the use of water intra-basin, within the basin, just only prior consultation and how much you use water, because sometimes take water from area 1 to area within the MRC can be affected the flow change. And also for the wet season, it's not much for specific agreement, just prior consultation if agreed by the country, inter-basin, and intra-basin in the basin, just only notifying. And for tributaries, all of the Mekong Basin, both in the dry and wet season, they need to notify for the notification country have to notify to the member countries. This is really important that we apply the 1995 Mekong Agreement and through the PNPCA process. Important thing for prior consultation, is sometimes people ask that why it is important. So we have to apply the article, some article of the 1995 Mekong Agreement, one about the cooperation mechanism. We should think about this important, yes or no. Yes or no, it means that not politics action, because country can be vote or not to vote for consensus agreement. And also article number 5, it think about reasonable and equitable use. If the country think about their development, they should think about article 5 because not affect to the use of the water. So the waters of the Mekong must be reasonable use, equitable use, not overuse, and not the subject for development. Again, the 1995 Mekong Agreement. And also it should identify measures that make more reasonable, equitable, article number 7 important. And this process for prior consultation take only 6 months when the identifying country propose their own project. So the Mekong River Commission Secretariat will support, coordinate this process to all member countries, and at the end decided by the joint committee of the Mekong River Commission. And we can see that the benefit from the prior consultation process, because to support country understand why the country proposed the development. So they can engage their own member agency like ministry or civil society or different stakeholders in the country. So they participate in the consultation, national consultation. They may share view, they may share the concern. So are facilitated by the national committees. So that official to improve the baseline data information, because all proposed development, they should provide us clear how the baseline data information they have, and discuss mainly on transboundary and accumulative impact from upstream to the downstream, and improve the project design, construction, and operation as the part of the PCA said in 1995 Mekong agreement, think about the dry season and wet season, and depend review recommendation from the expert. So we use behind the interdependent expert, and improvement and adaptation proposal project also after all comment or recommendation from the countries. And this process we agreed, and at the end we have to follow up what the process to be good or not. We have to join work plan, joint work plan and information monitoring plan. And this is the hydropower project when they submit to the consultation by country like Laos PDR, they submit, and we have experience since 2010 up to now, like Sayaburi, you may know, Donsahong, Pak Bang, Pak Lai, Dom Prabang. So those be recorded 6-month prior consultation process. Sometimes we delay, especially the last few years, 2 years we delay because of the COVID-19. And now we are come from with the new one ongoing process we call Sanakam and Phungoy of Laos. You can see that for hydropower development, we have the preliminary design guidance on the mainstream dam. So the country bring into account for their own development. And we discussed a long time ago on this, and we apply for any hydropower development. Especially this guideline recommend on how the developer must design, must construct, and must operate their own hydropower development on the mainstream by taking consideration on hydrology and hydraulics, because hydrology may be changed, water flow may be changed, hydraulic may be operate impact to the lower basin. Sediment transport really important for agriculture, for ecosystem in the river. Water quality we also take consideration, important for aquatic ecology because they live in the river. So including fish migration. So all development should think about the fish passage and fish passage. And dam safety, of course, very important. You know, if any earthquake or any flood to be dam to the dam must be dam safety. Navigation, we have the navigation think about the flow to the downstream because we need water for navigation. So the navigation lot important for the dam. And transboundary socio-economic impact is really important for the people who living along the river and may get impact directly to them. And this is implementation, as I told you already, why we need the prior consultation. The country submit the submit their document for hydropower development, and MRC Secretariat to support, coordinate, facilitating document to be sent to the country. And then we have 6 months with possible extension. If during the 6 months still have problems, still have the issue not finished by the country, we can ask extension for more 6 months. More 6 months. However, from experience, we complete only 6 months and then we can move to another. So then we have post prior consultation upon on the agreement or approval from the joint committee. So this is the process. We have at least 3 important process in order to get approval from the KC and to run the hydropower development. Now come to operation.
You have 3 minutes.
Okay.
I'm sorry, you have 3 minutes.
Okay, I will finish. And now we think about 1995.
3 minutes.
3 minutes.
Please go ahead.
The 1995 Mekong Agreement provide us opportunity to work together, especially on the legal binding. What I mentioned that when we think about hydropower development, we should apply the PCA but PNPCA itself not work, must work related to another procedure like water quality procedure, information exchange, or to think about how to maintain the flow on the mainstream and how to maintain water use in the mainstream. This is really important. And the MRC work not only for hydropower development, but we work all aspects for sustainable development. So we think about the well-being aspect for the people. We think about sustainable development for economic growth. We think about how we can keep cooperation among members, country, among the people, among the different stakeholders, and also we keep climate change, how we can take care about climate change and protection of the environment. So the MRC, we work not only alone for country, but contribute to the UN SDG. What we can see mentioned, as I said already. And strengthen cooperation is really important. What I can say that it is the key success for the MRC. Stakeholder engagement, we have to work hard on our stakeholder in the country and the region, and we have to be proactive communication with all member country, with the government, and partner with the development partner. Korea is one development partner to support our donor. So this is, I would like to bring your attention that MRC is created, we work to implement the policy strategy guided by the leader. So we have the Mekong Summit. We will have Mekong Summit number 4 in Laos in 2023. So we work dialogue with partner China and Myanmar. This is the structure how we can work under the 1995 Mekong Agreement. So it's the picture to show you that we work with dialogue China and Myanmar, and also we sign some agreement important to share data information on wet and dry season. On the Lansang, what we call Lansang Mekong border. So all I finished. Thank you very much for your kind attention.
Thank you very much. Mr. Botkosal, so you have one comment? 30 seconds.
I don't have a comment, but
okay, great.
This forum give me opportunity to talk with you, and I hope that for future we can talk again.
Thank you very much, all the participants, speakers and the panelists. I'd like to appreciate your big support and the contribution for the session. So now I close the session. Thank you very much. Okay, bye.
Bye. Thank you very much.
Bye.